Uh, my name is Paul Hansen. I work for Dagens Nyheter. It means daily news in Stockholm, Sweden, as a photojournalist, but I also write. But I'm employed as a photographer. The title of this little talk is "What does photo have to do with journalism?" And I'll try to explain that. This couch is a symbol for me. It's a symbol of the situation, the position that photojournalism is in and has been in for a very long time. This is the photo couch. This is the photographer's couch in my newspaper. This is the illustration of the narrative, or how it works in a newspaper. Photographers are more or less like taxi drivers, especially staff like I am. We're supposed to sit on this couch literally and wait for our assignments. And our daily assignments takes us everywhere. We have a wide range of responsibilities. And it's always the written word that initiates the... I'm sorry, would you stand further away? Because it's an echo. That initiates the assignments we do. And so it could be anything from illustrating an article like this, when I picked my own brother as a model. He was not happy because it was raining. And there was a traffic police in helicopters, so they started flying over us. So she was not happy. But the person who was most unhappy was my brother's wife when she saw this picture. So we do everything on a daily assignment sheet. I do sports. I did a lot of sports when I started out my photography. And sports is very difficult. I hate sports because I'm not really interested. I found myself making up excuses for the pictures I would miss in the football game that haven't even started yet. So I really admire sports photographers. So we do a lot of daily assignments. It could be talking to some woman at a farm. Of course, it's accidents like a fire in a building, or like here outside a tanning salon in Stockholm. What I find interesting with this picture is that you can note that the dangerous gas is very limited, and the police knows where that is. It could be go to a daycare center to shoot the children who are playing for an article. But since my paper is based in the capital of Sweden, we do a lot of politicians. That's maybe the bulk of what we do, news-like. So it tends to be a lot of pictures like this. This is the Swedish Prime Minister after a debate. So it's really difficult to shoot politicians because usually they're very boring. But sometimes there's bigger events, like this was the last election. This is the outgoing Prime Minister who lost the election, and this is the Prime Minister coming into the election. This picture I took a couple of days ago when the Prime Minister reshuffled after a couple of scandals. Two ministers were quit, and he put two more ministers into the equation. But all these pictures I've showed you so far, they are an aberration. It's not normal. Most of what I do, I call default mode. It's this. It's whatever the subject, we meet a person. It could be somebody who wants to tell us about the bad healthcare. It could be a politician. It could be a singer. It could be anybody. But visually, it's always the same thing. It's about an hour of interview, and then 5 minutes, oh, yeah, we need a picture. So we are really experts in taking pictures under a 5-minute span. All pictures I show you now, I took under less than 5 minutes. Actually, this picture I took a week and a half ago, I only was allowed 2 minutes with Mr. Lavrov. So you have to be very creative on a very small scale. So if it's a director in a theater, okay, can you stand in the elevator, blah, blah, blah. If it's a woman in head of the largest union, could you sit in this red couch because she's social democrat, it's the party color. If you have no ideas, you can always take down the mirror from the toilet and ask one rap artist to hold it, so his friend is mirrored in the picture. You ask the actors to be in the doorway and you ask the director to look after for the screen. I had no idea who this guy was. I know. Now I know. He wrote the Game of Thrones books. But when I got here, many of these assignments are especially difficult because you not only get 5 minutes, you get 5 minutes with 7 other photographers in segments. So it was me and 7 other photographers trying to take his picture. And then when we were finished, after our 5 minutes, another 5, 7, 8 photographers came and did the same thing. Different pictures, but the same thing. I wonder why there were so many photographers. Who is this fat old man? This is the head of the Swedish National Bank. This is the American ambassador, newly appointed. This is a rock singer in Sweden, Veronica Maggio. This is a movie director. This was the head of the Swedish Academy who hands out the Nobel Prize. So basically what we get when we leave our paper, we get a sheet, an assignment sheet. And on this assignment sheet, it says, okay, you're going to meet the head of the Nobel Academy in Literature in a cafe. So you go there. This picture I took in less than 2 minutes. I walked in, I took away his coffee cup, asked him to sit there, just stay where he was, look at me, and I took it. But sometimes these assignment sheets they make it more difficult. You still only have 5 minutes normally, but they make it even more difficult, the editors, because they also want a cover shot. A picture is going to be on the front page. So when I took this picture of Mary Ellen Mark, Mary Ellen Mark is a very famous photographer. She's deceased now, but she was sitting, being interviewed in a room much like this, quite dark. So I asked her and the reporter to move to a big window. And on the wall, there was a photo. So I took it down, and I let her be framed. Because if it's in your assignment, you also need to take a cover shot or a front page picture. You have to think about that the picture is not only a picture of the person, it also has to carry the text. But all the pictures I've showed you so far, the bulk of what we do, the majority of what we do is 80% portraits. But it's not journalism. It's something else. It's illustration. It's the word deciding that we need a text about this author. I mean, this author is not like she's always standing in this tree and I just happen to pass by. So what I'm trying to look for when I do my assignments, when I try to move photography out of the couch, out of the waiting mode, out of waiting for inspiration or 5 minutes of taking pictures, I try to find the stories where I can tag along, where I can do, well, actually from the beginning I try to find something I myself are interested in. I try to find the spaces of time where I try to find present tense. So instead of just saying, okay, we'll see, we have 1 hour, I'll do 5 minutes, I'll tag along the whole day, see what you do. And sometimes it's a special kind of story, like here is Matthias, the boy on the left, he has a very bad disease. It's a genetic disorder, so it means his brain is collapsing. They didn't know this until he was 9 years old. And his brother Felix in the foreground has the same disease. The problem with the disease is if it breaks out, it's too late. So you have to monitor the children very often to be able to stop the disease with a certain method. So when Matthias got sick, the family realized that Felix also had the disease. So he was a ticking bomb. I mean, they only had a few months or maybe 1 month to save him if the disease broke out. So this family was very famous in Sweden before we started this story, because they were allowed to pick an egg from the mother, from Helena, this mother here, to customize a sister to him, to these 2 boys, to take the stem cells from the umbilical cord and use that to save Felix when, not if, but when the disease broke out. So I traveled to their city and I hung out with the family for a long time, over time. That's what I try to do. I go down 1.5 a day, I go back, 2 weeks later I go back, and then I start building a story over time. So this is just pictures from many of those trips, which turned into a big story. And here they sedate Felix to give him a CAT scan of his brain to see if the disease is there. So it was very a difficult story to do emotionally for me and also for the family, of course, not so much for me as for them, because the longer they try, the more they try to get this perfect sibling with this perfect stem cells, the bigger the risk was that Felix was going to get sick. So I was very surprised we were also allowed, I was here to take the pictures of when they took out the eggs. This is the third time they do it of Helena, and this is also when they were successful. I was just very happy there was a computer screen that I can block the view a little bit. So they were very happy, but still the clock was ticking, and they took down Felix's old bed from the attic, and he was not happy about getting a sister. But after a while, he got used to it. So, but as you can see here, this is a totally different kind of storytelling. This is more visual journalism for me. And this is the night, or the day Emma was born. Felix was very proud to be a big brother, but scared. But he picked out the pajamas, her first pajamas for himself. But the interesting thing was the story didn't stop here. The story didn't stop with them going home with the new child. The story continued. And actually Felix got sick 2 years ago, and he got a bone marrow transplant. So he's okay. And here they are today. What I try to do is, I'm always on the lookout for these types of stories that I can build, like with Lego, like one piece at a time. And I try to find, when I do these daily assignments I talked about earlier, like I meet, the good thing about being a photographer and being ordered out on many assignments all the time is that you meet a lot of people. And I meet all those people. It's like a radar screen of the society. And in those meetings, I meet a lot of interesting people that I only take one picture of. So very often, too often, because I have so many projects simultaneously going on, I tell them, can I do a story about you and a bigger story about you? So I'll just tag along. And this is one of those things. We met this woman. She was blind since birth. She has one daughter. But when she moved from one place to another, one municipality to another in Sweden, in Stockholm, they cut down her help from 60 hours a week to 13. But her being blind with a 4-year-old daughter, it means she cannot leave the house. So that was the story. And that was the story the first time, but only with a portrait. And then the second time, I followed her for a few months. And this is her story.
Ja, hur det är att vara blind, svårt att säga. Alltså jag hör ju ljud och sånt blir ju viktigt. Men jag tycker om kaffebryggan när den puttrar, eller den här doften av kaffet, det är viktigt. Eller den här doften när man bakar hembakat bröd, och då blir det viktigt. Och smakupplevelser och sånt blir såklart viktiga.
Hela världen. Jag skulle säga till alla.
Jag hade 60 ledsagartimmar där jag bodde förut i Rågsved. Och så nu när jag flyttade hit så fick jag 13 ledsagartimmar efter många turer med överklaganden hit och dit. Men det intressantaste av alltihop är ju att jag har fått mindre ledsagning så jag fick barn. Fast jag egentligen då behöver mer. Och som jag sa någon gång, jag har skrivit det till enhetschefen också, att jag tror tjejerna på Inseberg faktiskt har ett bättre liv än vad vi har. De kommer åtminstone ut varje dag. Jag är arg och jag är ledsen och jag är frustrerad och förbannad på dem. Och skulle gärna vilja kunna logga in med deras hjärnor och se hur de tänker. Men man måste ju orka. Men sen är det väl så också att, som jag säger, om jag ger upp då har ju de vunnit. Så det får inte hända bara. Utan jag hänger med bara för rent jävelskap, så hänger jag med. Ha busigt. Till Emils dag.
Det är inte jag som
Om du var vaken skulle jag ge dig allt det där jag aldrig ger dig. Vem du, jag ger dig min morgon, jag ger dig min dag. Vart ska vi rida? Till en liten piga. Och vad ska hon heta? Jungfru Margareta. Men när vi kom... Ska jag överklaga till kammarrätten såklart, det är det som gäller. Men jag kan göra det och fortsätta kämpa på. Fortsätta förklara. Med en dåres jävla envishet. Fortsätta förklara. Att ge Veronica det bästa, det är väl det som driver mig. Att inte ge upp.
So as you can see, it's a totally different kind of story when you do something else. But it's really a big challenge for me because we're only 10 photographers at my paper staff. We also use freelancers, but the assignment sheet is still very long, so I have to be very flexible in the way I work to be able to do the press conferences, then maybe spend 3 hours on the subject and then do another thing. So it takes a long time for me to build these stories. But if you go, when I go abroad, when I go on assignment abroad, and my paper, we travel a lot, it looks like this in my hallway. It always looked like this. I'm very paranoid about my equipment, so I always put it on the floor and double check and triple check. But when you go abroad, the biggest problem disappear. The static meeting, the 5 minute of shooting somebody in a stairway or against a wall. That's not a problem anymore because you are already in present tense. You are following a story, whether it's the war in Gaza or a refugee camp or whatever it is. It's a fluid moment, and you're per definition, you're a journalist. But this is me shooting in Gaza, and this is the picture I shot in that moment. This is the war 2 summers ago. I'm going to show you a small movie clip now, because it's another challenge when I go out in these places, is that how do you show something that's so fluid and so complex and so traumatic sometimes in a still photo? So since we also film nowadays, I also film sometimes. But I'm just going to show you, first of all, you're going to see what's happening in the hospital after an Israeli airstrike. And then in the end of this clip, you will see those pictures I took the same day in the same place. So you see what I see, you hear what I hear, and out of this chaos, this complexity, you have to find something to condense what's going on. The only way to work in Gaza during that war was to use the ceasefires. They were infrequently proclaimed, But the ceasefires, even there was usually it was a 6 to 8 hours ceasefire. Both sides agreed not to shoot, and then they started shooting maybe an hour and a half into that ceasefire. That's how it worked. But when the ceasefire was proclaimed from like early in the morning, everybody rushed in, journalists also. So because the people, they rushed into Beit Hanun, like here, to see their destroyed houses. They walked to Kuza to get their killed relatives, to find what they could find and save what they could save, because the war was very cruel. There was 77 Israelis died on one side, and I think 2,500 Palestinians. Of those were 600 to 700 children. So it was a very, very traumatic place to be, and it was very difficult to shoot still, I think, because it's always very difficult. It's a very challenging thing to do. But stories come to you everywhere. I mean, we stood and talked to the man on the left in the blue shirt, the adult man, with the psychologist at the hospital, Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. We talked to the psychologist about the internal injuries, the psychological damage of children, more or less, mostly about children. And then this guy came up and he told us about the little boy in the bed next to him, that nobody knew who he was. Somebody found him in the rubble. And it turned out he was, out of 18 people in that house, there was only 2 that survived. He was one of them. All of his family, his parents, everybody, brothers, sisters, was killed by an Israeli strike. His name is Yamin. And last year we went back, me and a reporter. We always try to go back. I once had a question, how often I go to Gaza or the West Bank, and I said, I don't know. It feels like a continuous trip. I'm either there before a war, during a war, or after a war. But as long as there's no political solution, it's going to continue like this. So even a year after the last war, there people were still gathering their belongings of the ruins. Out of 17,000 destroyed, partially or totally destroyed houses, there was none that was rebuilt. We met an old lady who lived in the ruins of her house with 5 children. Her husband left her and got another wife. There were 1,000 people who lost at least one limb during the war, and we did portraits of a few of those people. So it was really a trip into hell, and it's still a hell. But there's also some nice stuff. This is Yamin again, the boy you saw in the bed. He's now living with his uncle. And this is the house behind them where they were staying in when they was killed. His family, mother and father was killed. When me and a journalist, Mats Lundegård, we went to Iraq. We were on our way to Kuwait during the war of 2003. And he said this to me. I asked him, so what do you want to do? What are the parameters? And I think it was what was speaking inside of me was the couch you saw, because I'm subordinate to the writing journalist. And he immediately just waved that away and said, let's just land and we'll see what happens. And it sounds like a very banal, a very simple thing to say, but this is, for me, is the foundation of visual journalism, of any journalism. We'll land and we'll see what happens. We'll write what we see, not what the editors want us to see, or maybe what the writers, or the readers, what we think they want to see. It may sound very, like I said, stupid, but later in Baghdad, I met a colleague of mine. He was called from his editors in Stockholm, and they told him to go to a hospital, to a maternity ward where somebody had given birth to a child, and to take a picture of the child and the family and do the headline. They should write the headline, "Born Free" or "Born in Freedom," which was crazy because there was still war. There was still a lot of plunder activities. There was still a lot of action. There was a lot of refugees. There was no freedom. There was no peace. So they had to do something that wasn't real. So that, for me, is what visual journalism is one of the biggest responsibilities. We have to be out there, we have to see the real world. We have to be accountable for what we do, we have to report what we see. So I'm just going to take you through that trip we did. We were there for 3 weeks. First of all, the Americans wouldn't let us into the country, but we went to a British checkpoint instead in Basra, and they let us through. So this is a man who came in with his son with a bad head injury in Basra hospital. This is the only place we could stay the first few days in the country because this was surrounded by British troops. So the security was okay, and the whole hospital was empty except for the emergency ward in intensive care. So a lot of journalists stayed here because there were snipers on the roof and there was tanks around the building. So he came in with his son who was hit in the fighting, the bombing, and I don't think his son made it. This is a man who was waiting to die. He was surrounded by his parents. He didn't breathe. He had, like you see, a bullet in his neck that cut the cord. So we traveled up the country and we saw this scene. We just stopped. Everywhere we stopped, we saw something. What are you doing? So like this turned out to be a major story because these people are relatives. Behind me, or to the left of me, there is a really big camp, like containers, huge square of containers with Iraqi war prisoners. And these are their relatives trying to find out if their brother or father or etc. is in this camp, because if they were, they're still alive. So a lot of desperate people was waiting for information from the American military. And this is, every day we delivered stories to my paper of what happened. But sometimes we stumble over stories that we waited with them, so we published them in another format in our Sunday paper, because just to give a story 1 or 2 pages was not enough sometimes. And also we felt that this type of story I'm going to tell you about here kind of drowned out in the normal news flow. This is a man, I saw this guy, you see the highway behind him. There's a highway, Al-Rashid Highway in Baghdad. I saw just a little box and something black. It was his head. I said, what is that? Let's stop. So it turned out this guy, so many people were killed during the invasion of Iraq, especially the attacks on Baghdad. So people just buried them wherever they were. They took their driver's license and put on top of the grave, and maybe a stone. And this guy's little brother, 19-year-old, was missing. So he went from mosque, to hospital to try to find him. So he was informed about this place where a lot of those people were buried. And he found a note with his brother's name, he told us. Him and his friend dug up the grave, but he couldn't recognize the body because it was very damaged. But he recognized the shoes. So when the interpreter told me that, I realized why he was sitting looking at those shoes. But he was waiting here, and we were allowed to wait with him. He waited for many hours for his friends to go and maybe try to get a car so they could move his brother to the family house. So we went along. And there was no telephone service, of course, in these days, so his mother and father did not know what happened to their son. So when we came to the family house, they were grief-stricken, they was traumatized, of course. It was a horrible scene. And the mother wanted to open the coffin all the time to see her son, but her son stopped her. And it sounds horrible, but the smell was very bad, so they put a blanket over the coffin to stop her. And this is his best friend from school. There was many different layers of horror in Iraq, still are, but this is one of them. This is lists of people executed during Saddam. So when Saddam's soldiers and security people just ran away, all these archives opened up. So people went there and they copied the archives and put them on the walls of these buildings, the security buildings. And a lot of people went there to see if their mother, brother, whatever were there. And we met one woman who lost her son 10 years earlier. And she was looking for an answer. She both wanted the answer and didn't want the answer. And on this particular list, there were 12 names from the same family. They were all shot in the head. And these are just volunteers trying to get information and give information. It was chaotic. And these are volunteers from a local hospital trying to dig up bodies from a battlefield outside the city. And the smell in the city was horrible in these days. It was very hot. So it was like a sanitarian problem. This is the woman who lost her son 10 years earlier. 2 cars came up to them. They dragged out her son in the middle of the night, and she hasn't seen him. Since there was a lot of plundering, there was a lot of people looting everything. So there was spontaneous weapons markets everywhere. So this is a place, it was very dangerous for us to be there because nobody wanted to be photographed. It was especially dangerous because the American soldiers made raids in, so they killed a lot of people trying to buy these guns. But our interpreter was a very good guy, so he found these people who were more or less friendly, so I was able to take this picture. So what we did when we were there, we tried to have themes every day, and normally those themes just went out the windows as soon as we stepped out in the car. So we stumbled over a looting scene outside a bank. We were there just after the fact. There was one guy, a little boy, that was hit by a bullet in the fight between the American army and these people trying to rob this bank, the vaults. So we moved further along the road, and then we went to the biggest bank. And then we saw something that was totally unique in those days. It was this guy standing up. We saw Iraqi police cooperating with Americans. So what they did was they surrounded this bank, and they shot a lot, and they screamed at these looters. There was a lot of looters in the bank, down in the vault. And after a while, they came out, and they arrested them very forcefully. And of course, I've been here before to Ukraine. The story of Ukraine and the Maidan Revolution and the annexation of Crimea, it was a very big news for us in Sweden because our history with Russia as a neighbor is not similar to yours. But when I did my military service, the only thing we ever trained against was the threat from the east. So a large country from the east capturing a country or area like Crimea and fighting a war by proxy in the east was very big news for us. So my editor-in-chief told us we should be in the country at least a year, continuously almost. So I traveled, I think, 20 times to Ukraine, mainly to the east, to the Donbas area. And I'll show you 2 stories. The first story I'll show you is a little bit from Maidan. And the second story I'll show you is from last year.
Пісень солов'їних, де волошки цвітуть, і пшениця зерно наливає. Моя рідна земля, хай Господнє ім'я прославляє. Україно, рідний краю.
We know that our democracy is dead today, and we should to fight to be free.
Твої доли, твої луки, хай Господь збереже від розрухи. Сивочолий Дніпро свої води несе без упину. Слався земле моя, Україно, та за Богом іти вірний шлях і дорога
Щасливу і радості мить, любіть у годину негоди, любіть Україну у сні наяву, вишневу свою країну, красу її вічно живу і нову, і мову її солов'їну. Красу її вічно живу і нову, і мову її солов'їну. Юначе хай буде для неї твій сміх.
Господь посилає.
Думаю, что оно, во-первых, не перейдет в настоящий мир. В настоящий мир оно перейдет, когда Украина будет единой. Меняется отношение к смерти, меняется отношение к жизни, меняется отношение к ценностям. И это происходит настолько быстро, что ты не успеваешь даже остановиться, вот как... Путь солдата, он тяжелый, как бы. Люди эти все были до войны, кто был менеджером, кто продавцом, кто имел частный бизнес. Солдатом становится почему-то очень быстро. То есть ты сам этого не понимаешь и не осознаешь. И это, оно влияет не только вот на тебя, на твой взгляд, как бы. Оно влияет и на тебя как-то изнутри. Как это объяснить? Я не знаю, как это объяснить. И иногда меня это ужасает, как бы. Иногда, ну, на данный момент я наблюдаю только просто за собой.
Я йду на війноньку нашу землю захищати. Не бачте за мною, якщо в полі згину. Все віддам за любоненьку нашу Україну. Єднаємося, браття, цю лиху годину. Нехай ворог знає, ми за Україну.
Мир будет. Любая война заканчивается миром. Сколько бы она ни длилась, год, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, все равно рано или поздно наступит мир. И да, я в это верю. И я хочу дожить как бы до этого мира, я хочу вернуться домой. Единственное, что меня вот напрягает, каким я вернусь.
We did a lot of, since I started for this paper I work for now, 2000, the Intifada, the second rebellion in the West Bank started. So I've been doing a lot of conflict and crisis the last few years. When the Arabic Spring erupted in Tunisia, me and the reporter, we followed the Arabic Spring from Tunisia to Bahrain to Egypt and Libya. So, and what I'm going to show you now is a collection of 4 trips to Libya during the Arabic Spring.
Across the country, scores of demonstrators have been killed and many more wounded in the security crackdown.
Just for one hospital here in Benghazi, it's Jallah Hospital, 208 dead bodies had pulled from the street until this morning. This is in one city in Libya and in one hospital. Another hospital, just for one day, it's 12 dead bodies.
Chanting "There's no God but Allah," mourners carry the body of one of those killed. And there's more chaos.
Ja, situationen i Libyen börjar nu allt mer likna ett regelrätt inbördeskrig. USA har redan infört ekonomiska sanktioner och reseförbud mot Gaddafi och hans söner.
Gaddafis styrkor fortsätter sin offensiv och flera städer har attackerats. Hårda strider rasar runt.
At first, progress came quickly for the rebels, but they face a heavily armed and well-coordinated enemy. With each day, a long stalemate looks increasingly likely.
It took some time. The news has been coming through minute by minute over the last couple of hours.
Under gårdagen så strömmade omvärldens gratulationer in till det libyska folket. USAs president Barack Obama sa att
lately I've been doing a lot of stories about refugees. And I will show you, finalize this, ending this with show you the last three trips I did in Greece and Lesbos and Slovenia and Macedonia. I'm finished.
Друзі, ми можемо переходити до питань. Я сподіваюся, вони у вас є. Я, правда, не знаю, як то зробити з мікрофоном. Можливо, будете голосно говорити, чи я повторю. Так, будь ласка.
Скажіть, будь ласка, зараз Україна воює, ви знаєте про це, і нам доводиться певним чином робити ті речі, до яких ми не звикли. Скажіть, будь ласка, як ви комунікуєте з родичами, наприклад, загиблих під час зйомки конфлікту? Нас ледь не побили у шпиталі, де ми знімали опікове відділення для діточок після бомбувань. Тобто, як ви з цим, чи з вами їздить психолог, як ви комунікуєте з родичами, щоб вам дали дозвіл на зйомку, щоб вас не побили там? І друге питання, якщо можна, наскільки ваш редактор, то може до нього більше, але якщо ви зможете відповісти, як обмежується кількість крові, відірваних кінцівок, чи камуфлюються обличчя загиблого? Тобто, такі технічні питання, наскільки у вас це обмежується? Чи можна все, що ви побачили? Дякую.
For the first question, to avoid, you were beaten by the relatives or the staff at the hospital, or? Yeah. But then, I mean, it doesn't matter if we're in Sweden or if we're in Ukraine. It doesn't matter if it's peace or if it's war, normally for us. We go in, we say who we are, and if it's possible to do a story of them. If they say no, we back off. Always. It has to be like that. And I've not been threatened, but relatives, I met relatives that say no in Ukraine, of course, and then I don't do it. Because it wouldn't be respectful, it wouldn't be good. I mean, and normally in a hospital you have to ask the administrator if it's okay to even be there. It's my impression, even if it's war. And if they say yes, they can take you to somebody, and then, but normally you don't even get that far, because it's usually no. So I get many more no's than yes. If I didn't have time, I would show you more, but this is just, never mind this. The guy for the radio, he asked us, do we show the whole truth to our readers? Meaning the same thing. Can we show dead people? Can we show what's actually happening? In his question was almost an accusation of us lying a little bit. So I took out some pictures and I told him some stories of what we saw and pictures that we don't show. Like in Gaza, you saw some pictures from Gaza. And what happened when there was an attack, a lot of people came to the hospital. And where they're deceased. There was 700 children that were killed, so it was many children. So one day, it was many days, but one particular day I remember we were standing there, me and two other photographers, and the fathers came in with their sons and daughters, dead, in their arms, put them on the table. The doctor wrote out the death certificate to be able to bury them. And there was one father, I was taking pictures, I was trying to feel focused on the faces, because I really didn't want to see. But I noticed that the father was pulling a t-shirt, his dead son's t-shirt all the time. And then I lowered my camera, I could see why, because he tried to cover the injuries. This is a picture we would never publish. We would never publish this picture. And we would never publish this picture, even though this is what the pro-Russian separatists say was a soldier or a guy working against them. So, and I can show you worse, but there is, of course, a limit. And the limit is when, does it benefit the story to show these pictures? I was in Cairo, and there were a mosque filled with 217 dead people. Most of them were shot and burned. And many relatives took us up to the body bags, and they opened the body bags, and they demanded that I should take a picture to show the world. I didn't. But it's a very good question, but it's difficult to answer. Because you have to show somehow that people are getting killed without people bouncing away from the pictures. And also, us being a morning paper, the printed paper comes in on the hall floor of the people's houses. So what if there's a 4-year-old picks up the paper? You cannot, it's not ethical on many levels.
Є питання?
Andrei Umanets. I'm working for the website Economical News, and earlier I was working for a printing newspaper. We had writing journalists and photographers, and everyone did his job. And now I work alone, and I feel a huge necessity to make pictures and to work with them. What can you advise for professional writing journalists that are going to work with pictures? I understand the first step is simply to try, but probably you can give further advices. Thank you.
I have good sources. I have information that Dennis will address this issue after me, gentleman over there. But just briefly, like I showed you in the beginning, that's the main, what I do is taking pictures. I also write, so I do the same as you, but from the other side. So if it was going to be a story where the visual storytelling is important, I will divide my time up if possible. Today I'm gonna do your interview, and tomorrow I'll go with you to whatever you're doing. So otherwise, you just divide the time up in the interview as if you're two people. Don't try to do the same. I mean, both sometimes take pictures and no. That's the only thing I can say. I have the luxury, when I do my stories, I follow them. I only take pictures, but I also have a tape recorder, so sometimes I talk into it, and I just tape what they say, and then I make notes afterwards. That's my compromise.
Дякую вам за цю лекцію. Дякую вам за лекцію. Я би хотів у вас запитати. Ви показали себе з боку фотографа, але як ви не мотивуєте, як ви переконуєте себе, що треба їхати туди, робити ці кадри, і що ви знаєте, що можете самі стати героєм одного з таких фото?
I have when he means hero, he means dead, right?
Питання було в тому, що чи не боїтеся ви стати героєм таких фотографій?
What does it mean by hero?
Як ви мотивуєте себе туди їхати?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I never showed that before. Yeah. That's a really good question. This picture you saw of me, I never showed anywhere. It's not published. It's not going to be published. I really don't like when journalists go out especially to a war zone, and they become a part of the story. Like here behind me, you see refugees, and it makes me sick. It's hard work, but we go out 2-3 weeks to a place. Like I went to Libya once after Gaddafi fled Tripoli, and we went to Libya. We had no plan other than trying to find a place to live. There was no electricity, no water. It was war. So we had no interpreter. We had a guy driving us from Tunisia. So I saw 3 gentlemen sitting on a bench in suits. One of them had really kind eyes. So I asked him, do you speak English? And he spoke very good English. He was an oil engineer. So I asked him, would you mind to interpret us for us? We're Swedish journalists. We're going to try to do some stories the coming weeks. And he said yes. I mean, he was in desperate need of money as well, but he was a very nice guy. So I was in that situation. as a journalist, you're very stressed because you have a deadline. You don't know what you're going to do. Okay, so I was going, yalla, let's go. So he said, no, well, I can only work half a day today, he said. And I was pissed off, but I was like, why? Come on. I thought he was lazy or just afraid. I didn't know. But then he said, I can only work half a day today, Mr. Paul, because my son was killed yesterday. And I have to go home to arrange the funeral. So I said, of course, I'm so sorry. I mean, when people go, it's about stories about him. It's not about us accidentally getting shot at. Of course you will be shot at, it's going to be dangerous, but who cares? I mean, it's not about us, it's about the people we meet. I was once in Bosnia during the Bosnian War, and I was there with a very, very famous Swedish author, and we were shot at by a tank. So I told him, you will not say this to our editors. And he promised not to say anything, because if he would say that to my editors, the 2 weeks of work we would have done. Sorry, how long? Yeah. I was there with a very famous author. He became to be the head of the Nobel Academy Committee, handing out the prize in literature. So he's very, very famous in Sweden. And we were shot at by a Serbian tank, and it almost killed us. So I told him not to say anything, because if he would say anything, the story would be about him, not me, because he's famous. And it would kill the story we did for 2 weeks. And he didn't say anything. But when I came back home, it turned out that one of the soldiers told his girlfriend in Stockholm, who told somebody who worked at the paper. So the next day, when I came home, the big headline was Peter Englund almost shot in Bosnia. So it's a very good question, because I do not like that type of journalism. I recently read in a Swedish newspaper a woman who did a story. Actually, she did a story in Ukraine, in the Donbas area. And the headline was, I started crying when I saw how the women were living. I started crying? Who gives a shit about her crying? I want to have the story about the woman. It almost makes me angry.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Александр. И меня интересует вопрос обработки фотографии, то есть когда уместно сделать какую-то художественную обработку, и когда нужно стремиться к естественности. Спасибо.
Yeah, well, my pictures are very natural, because the only thing I do is to correct the colors, maybe make it a little darker, like in the edges maybe. So that's not the issue. The issue is sometimes, we're very conservative in my paper. I was once accused of manipulating a picture, but that taught me a lesson, a big lesson, because you should not. I didn't, I was freed, but it's the credibility of the photograph is very, very important. So we do in the computer the same thing you do in the dark room. You make it a little lighter or darker, or black and white sometimes. But sometimes there's an issue of when you shoot, the pictures get too aesthetical. So if I take a picture that's too beautiful, people have a reaction, this is war, it's horrible, but it's a nice picture. So that is sometimes a discussion.
Paul, thank you for this interesting masterclass.